Hello, my friends. How are you? I hope everybody's doing really well. I am I'm crazed this morning. I'm sorry. I apologize for still appearing in like my workout gear because and I've got like mascara on my eyelid and everything. We had a strange situation happen this morning with my kids' school, which is that today is technically their last day of school before the holiday break, and they have been assigned these home crafts to create turkey traps. I don't know how many of you have ever had to do this as a parent, but my entire downstairs is now like covered in paper and tape and crayons and everything. And it just was not exactly what I expected this morning, but like mandatory final Thanksgiving assignment. So in any event, I have been like running around nutty this morning, and I am prepared. I have my list as always. But I want to start by just marking for all of you that like it's official now. We are buildbackbetter.gov. We had finally Emily Murphy did her job last night. The transition funds have been released. It's real. I was able to watch like the last 5 minutes of the Biden press conference announcing the national security staff. Whew. I don't know if those of you who watched it felt exactly the same way I did, but man, I had this moment. And I even missed the new DHS secretary's statement, which I watched after the fact, about his stepfather being the only child out of 900 who escaped from Białystok, Poland, and went through 4 different concentration camps. I mean, whew. It is so, I was like crying by the time I got like into the first minute of it. This is the good news. I mean, obviously what Biden is trying to do here is say to the rest of the world, like, we're back, right? I will tell you, I'm really cautious about that lingo personally, because we still have so much work to do. And the thing that I am the most concerned about, and the activists that I am in circle with are the most concerned about, is a return to complacency, because I want to make it very clear that even though this is amazing and it is a huge relief, and we all, as Midwin Charles, who I follow on Twitter, said this morning, we all need therapy because we're all definitely like, weepy and stunned that like there's actually experienced people going into our government who are committed to the best interests of Americans. But all that said, I really want to make it clear, because I think it's really important at this moment to not forget that all the same conditions that existed in America that brought Trump to power are still here, and then some, because we've had 4 years of him, endorsing white supremacy and rolling back protections, and, putting migrant children in cages. There's 28 children right now at the border that the administration is threatening to deport without their parents. So we have a long way to go, but I do think that it's also, simultaneously really important to mark the fact that this is a win, and that so many of us have worked so hard for this for 4 years. And, I just want to, I don't know. I mean, I'm also like in kind of a puddle of gratitude these days. It was really fun to say to all of you last night on Twitter that like, fuck yeah, we're there. That was kind of a great joy on my part. But I'll also just say that, one of the things that's really remarkable about the fact that we're coming up now to the 4th anniversary of this broadcast, which we are going to rebrand, by the way. Like, I'm not going anywhere, but we're going to pick a different name. I don't know what we're going to call it yet, but I'm here for the foreseeable future. One of the things that I just want to say is that, I hope you all know that just in the same way, it's like an overwhelming sensation, and really lovely to have so many of you say to me that I have, helped to save your sanity, or helped to get you through, or motivated you, or taken your blinders off, or empowered you to go use your voice for change. That's awesome. I just want you all to know as well that like, I wouldn't have gotten through the last 4 years if it wasn't for all of you. Because part of what inspires me to keep going is to help other people make change. So, we're all, and to do that myself, of course, but really to kind of, push people in the direction of being able to really find their power again, and use that power to create power, and and to create revolution for everyone. So so we're all in it together. And I want to say thank you to all of you as much as you're saying thank you to me, because with every story that comes in about the work that you've been able to do, the fact that you've never canvassed before the last 2 years or 4 years, that you've never made phone calls for anyone before, that you were scared to call your rep before this all began, that you'd never considered yourself an activist, or for those of you who are longtime activists who just want, there were a bunch of people last night who said, just thank you every day for the daily dose of sanity and for talking me off the ledge 1,000 times. Yeah. I'll also just say this, part of coming here every day has so grounded me. Like, if you all had any idea what my life has been like kind of behind the scenes, particularly since the pandemic started, but, not to mention that in the last 4 years, I mean, those of you who are longtime followers know this, but like, I've gotten divorced. I've had a horrific custody battle. I moved across the country, right? I've been here single parenting now for the better part of 3 years. I just would not have had the ability to kind of continue on this path if this broadcast hadn't grounded me every day. Like, this is what I do every day. I get up and I talk to all of you. And so I just want to start by saying how thankful. Yes, I actually got 2 new puppies. Some of you don't remember this, but Sophie is only 3 years old. So Sophie, who was the original Resistance mascot, also was there. I nearly lost my home in a fire. Thank you for reminding me of all the kind of like wildness, right, that's gone on. I quit drinking. And there are more battles to come, but I just want you all to know that everything that you are sending my way is returned 1,000-fold, and I'm so grateful for all of you. So yeah, it's all good. All right, so let's talk a little bit about all this sort of stuff. So somebody asked about these cabinet noms and procedures for all of this. So I want to remind you all that the cabinet nominees are not going to be considered until January at the absolute earliest. We have to have the new Congress seated, which, by the way, reminder, Georgia. And they will be considered after Biden is sworn in. So for those of you who are worried about McConnell being able to obstruct any of this, Georgia. So don't worry about that. Okay. So, I'm hoping that we're going to be in a really good situation in Georgia. I want to make sure that we're all understanding the process that we have to go through in the next few weeks, because January 5th is not far away. We're like 5 weeks out right now from the Georgia runoff elections. And it's really important to get involved now if you can. Because of the turkey situation this morning, the turkey cage that I started out talking about, I wasn't able to do my Warnock phone bank this morning, but I am phone banking for Ossoff tomorrow and Friday, and I'm going to do a Warnock shift or 2 in there somewhere where I can find the time. You can register right through the campaign. They give you instant training. You just dial into a Zoom call. It's super easy. They have scripts that are really simple that they recommend you follow, particularly if you've never phone banked before. And it's really good. So let me just add one other thing, because I'm watching some of you circulate disinformation right now in the comments over here on the right-hand side of my screen. They are not purging voter rolls in Georgia. I want to make this really clear to everyone who has seen this and is circulating it. That is disinformation that is designed to keep voters from going to the polls. It is really, really, really important that you do not share that. And I will tell you that there's a lot of concern behind the scenes about that particular talking point. Quite to the contrary, one of the very interesting things that that Georgia has done in the last few days, just in the last few days, is they have expanded voting sites. It's now going to be possible in Atlanta to vote at 2 stadiums outside. They've also expanded access to voting in general. So there's like a whole bunch of modifications they've made since the general to allow expanded voter access. Like, you don't need a driver's license, reminder, you just need some form of Georgia ID to register. They're moving ahead, they're pushing ahead really hard to register people who were not registered to vote in the general because they were 17, not 18. And I'll just say this, like, the Georgia Secretary of State, who's a Republican, came out swinging against Trump. He's the guy who would have to be responsible for purging voters off the rolls. By the way, it's also a felony to purge voter rolls within 90 days of the election. It's not true. They're not doing it. So, again, this is a reminder, really, really significantly, again, to think about who benefits before you share information that you may be seeing on other people's feeds, right? The idea that voter rolls are being purged is actually something that ordinarily keeps people from going to vote, because why would they bother to stand in line for 3 hours only to find out that they're not on the rolls, or 6 or 12, right? We've all seen those enormous lines in predominantly Black districts in Georgia. So, again, really important here. Yes, we do want to encourage people to be registered to vote, to check their registrations. We do not want to share with folks the disinformation that those rolls have been purged. They have not, okay? And that TikTok, by the way, has now been tracked back. The one that I know, the TikTok is where this whole thing started. And that TikTok has been tracked back to a disinformation source. So, again, we can start with the positive messaging, right? Which is check your voter registration, request your absentee ballot, share the deadlines about all of this. Make sure that people understand when early voting starts. Make sure they understand the deadline for requesting an absentee ballot. Really incredibly important that you get all of this right. And let's be positive in the messaging, right? Again, disinformation is real. It's real. Okay, so that's that. Georgia. All right, and the ease of the cabinet nominations getting through the Senate entirely depends on this election. So let's get it done. I will share one bit of really good news, which is making me laugh every time I see it. But Roger Stone and others are out there encouraging people, like Republicans, to sit out the Georgia runoff election as an act of protest against the Republican Secretary of State, or to write in Trump's name for the Senate seat. I'm just going to say that I don't have any problem with that particular strategy. And every time I see it, I, retweet it with like, this is an absolutely brilliant idea. So let me just say one other thing here, because Matthew, I'm seeing your comment here that Amy Siskin pushed that story. I'm just going to say a couple of things. There have been so many sagas in the last 4 years about particular commentators. There are people who, if you have not followed them in nuanced detail, you don't know like the story here. There are commentators who are more prone to circulating disinformation than others. And I'm just going to leave it right there. You can, just because somebody's got 380,000 followers and a blue check mark, doesn't mean you don't have to check the sourcing. And, this is one of the reasons why the stuff that I share with you, you can always rest assured, is coming straight from the campaigns, okay? Like, I want to make this clear. I am not at liberty to tell you how I know all of this, right? Like, I'm under lockdown. What I will tell you is that it's coming straight from the campaigns if I'm sharing it with you. There is no, I can like 110% guarantee you that there is no purging of voters from the Georgia rolls right now. Okay. All right. Let's just talk for a second, by the way, speaking of social media, about regulation, because we had a really interesting question this morning about how do we regulate social media after the fact. Like, let's assume we win the Senate. We've got Biden in the White House, of course. And, and I will tell you that one of the things that I think we ought to be thinking about here, and other people are already thinking about it, Katie Porter's already thinking about it, AOC is already thinking about it, but is the regulation, if not the splitting up of some of these major media corps. There have been a lot of discussions about Facebook being a monopoly. The other thing I will say is there's an ongoing debate about whether or not Facebook should be classified as a news organization, in which case it would be regulated by the FCC. That potentially would have an impact on disinformation. Trust me, there is going to be, a lot to be said about this in the coming term. I'm sure of it. And the other thing I'll just add here is that I don't think that's something that's not directly on the radar of people who are working on the Hill right now on issues of election security. I think we're going to be in a position where there's going to be an enormous amount of work and legislation put into election security generally over the next 2 years. Again, very much dependent on Ossoff and Warnock winning in Georgia, but I think we're going to end up with a lot more going forward on that front from the standpoint of legislation than what we have had. Okay, a lot of concern this morning about the Open Skies Treaty, justifiably so. I am going to just say that while this does look like, for those of you who missed it, let me back up. There was a reporting yesterday, and then Rachel went in depth onto it last night about Trump walking away from the Open Skies Treaty, which monitors Russia through surveillance planes on their nuclear proliferation. Trump announced yesterday pulling out of the Open Skies Treaty, destroying the airplanes. I'm just going to add one thing about this. Yes, it sucks that he's destroying the equipment. And one of the things that's very much true here is that we will be able to rebuild that, and we can re-enter the treaty. So, don't remember, we're now like, whatever it is, 57, 56 days out from the inauguration. Yes, there's a lot of damage that can be done in that window of time. But do I think that damage right now at this moment is such that, like, Biden's not going to hold Putin's feet to the fire on nuclear proliferation from day one? No. I think that, this is the other thing to remember here is that the DOD has now been given instructions to support the incoming Biden administration. It's going to be an interesting thing to see what happens when the national security experts that were announced today, the nominees that have been announced for Homeland Security and the like, get a look-see on the inside of what's been happening inside of their various agencies. I think that we might end up with a better understanding of what's really happening here. And I also, this is the other thing to remember, is it's not like the technology vanishes into thin air. We may lose the planes, but the technology that created them still exists. So, again, we'll have to see. But, the good news about where we are now, particularly with, the concession, quote unquote, such as it is, the fact that the funds have been released for the transition, is that we are going to end up in a place where, all of this can be repaired in very short order. The other thing I will just say here, Melissa, I'm just seeing your comment about DOD dragging their feet. That is absolutely what I'm hearing from my contacts inside intelligence and inside the Department of Defense. That in fact, the military has been so disgusted, that leaders in intelligence and in DOD have been so disgusted by the willingness to sell off and betray America's interests, that, the things now that are being promised by Trump in terms of destruction on the way out the door may not even take place. So, and again, can't tell you how I know this stuff, but, I know somebody who is very senior in intelligence who has said that DOD's cooperation with the Biden team is likely to be, very, very rapid and supportive. So, that's that. All right. Couple of things I want to remind you all of about what Biden is saying right now about Trump. So, I said earlier in the week, or maybe it was the end of last week, that no one should take the idea that Biden is saying, we'll see where we are on prosecutions and the like, as a sign that that's not going to take place. One of the things that I want to remind everyone of is that the DOJ is supposed to be independent. We've all gotten very used to, under the Trump administration, the DOJ taking orders from the president. That is not how it has ever worked under any other administration. And so one of the things that you all should be aware of is that Biden's saying, we should let go of the rhetoric. I don't like that so much, I will be honest, because I do think that, the abuse that we've all suffered at the hands of Trump needs some form of accountability. And I also am not planning on forgiving any of the white supremacists who voted for him. I don't know how you voted for Trump without understanding just what a racist piece of shit he is. All that said, remember that Biden's statements about accountability are driven by the desire for an independent DOJ. That in and of itself is healing. It is important. It is critical in many ways for the adequate and successful functioning of our democracy. We're going to see who his attorney general nominee is before too long. The latest thing that I'm hearing is that Sally Yates is at the top of the pile. We'll see what comes of that. Again, I said last week, I'm not getting up in arms about this, because honestly, the bench we have of potential AG candidates is incredibly deep. Schiff, Preet Bharara, Doug Jones. We've got Sherilyn Ifill, who's the current head of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, who I honestly hope is the first Black female nominee to the Supreme Court, but she could be a very successful, fantastic candidate for attorney general. We have yet to see who's going to be put in that role, and that person needs to have their independence. So, I think that the accountability question is, let me put it this way. I'm not worried at this moment about this administration and their enablers not being held accountable. And I'm just going to remind you all that it doesn't even depend on the federal government, right? We know Tish James has, as the New York Attorney General, has more investigations up her sleeve than any of us know about. We also know that, the Association of Attorneys General, particularly the progressive attorneys general who have been so active in suing the Trump administration concerning various things like sanctuary cities and environmental regulations and everything else. Those folks aren't going anywhere. So, at this stage of the game, reminder, like, there's we got a long way to go on this. And then there's the local prosecutions like Cy Vance in Manhattan, who's been in a battle with the Trump administration that's gone all the way up to the Supreme Court twice just to get the financial records out of his accountant. So, again, nobody should be getting up in arms about the idea of that. I think we are going to be in a position where we're going to know a lot more about that in the coming days. And I'm going to remind you all of one other thing. In the announcement that was made yesterday, at the moment where the transition was officially funded by the GSA, there was a statement from the Biden transition team about the fact that they were looking forward to getting a look-see. This is like the last sentence of the announcement, I'm paraphrasing it, into how badly the agencies had been gutted under this administration. Even that in and of itself says something about what they're looking at right now and what that accountability might look like. So I want everybody to take a pause on that. Again, this is not an appropriate moment. We don't even have an AG nom yet to announce what those prosecutions could look like. And the states are already at it. So, onward we go. Okay. I don't think anybody should be worried about that. I do, but I will say that I'm a little wary of the lingo about forgiveness and accountability and forgiveness and, like coming together and ending vitriol. I will tell you that I think that Biden statement this morning, though, was directed at Republicans. So, again, we'll see what comes of all of that. All right. A couple things I just want to mention here about COVID. While we're at it, okay? There are some very, very dire predictions this morning from Lori Garrett and others concerning where we are likely to be by the end of the year and where we may be by the time Biden takes office. The numbers are staggering. There are predictions now that we may end up with like 24 million Americans infected by the end of the year, that our death toll could double or almost double. So I think that I just have to say to all of you again, to whatever extent you're frustrated and tired, and believe me, I completely get it. You don't even want to know the meltdowns that have happened in this house around this week. And last, I also just want to say, like, please don't let your guard down, because it's worse now than it's ever been. The numbers in my county, I look at it every day. It's leaving me speechless right now. In the space of a week, we've gone from an average number of cases between 200 and 400 to yesterday, we had almost 1,500 cases. That's happened in the space of about 6 days. So, if we're even a microcosm, arguably, of what's happening in this country, it's already really bad. There's 80,000 people in the hospital right now in this country, in the ICU. They're running out of beds everywhere. We're down to under 25% of available ICU beds in the state of California. We've been fairly progressive in terms of the lockdowns and the like. There's a lot of argument about it, but it's not like most of California has been out walking around without a mask. So it's just, go small, right? Like, just please go small. And also, I'll just add, there was some reporting this morning that people are making Christmas plans because they're not doing anything for Thanksgiving. It's going to be way worse by Christmas. Like, let's just understand now that, like, until we have widespread vaccine distribution, this is where we are. Now, the good news is it does sound like there is some polling being done now at hospitals about being first on the line for vaccine distribution as soon as December. Okay, which, by the way, is only 7 days from now. It's really critical at this point that we help to preserve our healthcare workers. Just some of the stuff that I've learned over the last few days and some of the conversations that I've had behind the scenes. Our healthcare workers are just cracking under the pressure that they're experiencing right now. It is just widespread trauma. And those are the ones who have survived and are surviving, who aren't watching their colleagues code out or who have watched their colleagues code out. So it's just, if you're going to thank anybody this season, like thank frontline healthcare workers, do it publicly and stay home. They deserve our respect, and they deserve our understanding, because, I've talked to a couple of people in the last few days, and you would just not believe the degree of, maybe you would, but the degree of trauma that these people are working and living through right now, it's unspeakable. So just really, really important to pay attention to that. And, look, the other thing I'll say is, like, there's a light at the end of the tunnel now, right? We have 3 vaccines that are arguably going to be functional. You can bet your bottom dollar that the Biden team is going to ramp into it as fast as humanly possible once they're in office. We may be out of the woods here by, the end of the spring. It's not that far off. We've made it already through 9 months. We might as well make it like another 4, 5, 6, and do our very best at all of this. And yes, it's tough. And yes, therapists are going to be overwhelmed by the time it's over. But, if our hospital systems are completely overwhelmed, that will mean that if you get sick, there will not be a bed for you. And what that means for the death rate from COVID in this country is terrifying to me. So let's just really be smart about it. All right. Final question we had today, which was a really interesting question from the activism standpoint that I want to address. We have a lot of folks in this community who are newer activists, and we have a lot of folks in this community who've been doing it their whole lives, like me. This question came from someone who had been very active in the civil rights movement, who is an elder now, who has had the experience of being kind of told by younger activists to, sit down and shut up, basically. The question was fundamentally about how do we reconcile between younger generations who are doing the work and older generations who are doing the work. So let me just say this. I don't think this is a new challenge. I think that, where I sit right now in middle life, I see both sides of it because I learned to be an activist. I say this routinely, but from ACT UP, from gay men and women who were on the streets doing really radical activism during the AIDS crisis when I was a teenager. I have the most immense respect for the people that I learned from, and for all the lives that were lost in that pandemic and all the actions that were taken to try to get some accountability from the Reagan administration. That was my first really hardcore introduction to activism. And I have, we stand on the shoulders of giants. There's no question about that. The other thing that I will say here is that the younger generation right now, which is the case, by the way, for every generation of younger activists, pushes us. And, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I'm not in favor of disrespect, of course. And also, I think that collaboratively, we have a lot to learn from one another. And I'm always in the framework of trying to be collaborative in that way. One of the things that can be done here is to model how to listen. That may mean saying, not just doing the kind of cookies thing that I think we older activists are want to do, like I've been in this for 35 years. I did it this morning, even on Twitter, but that's fine. I did it to a reporter who made a really nasty comment about me, and I kind of don't regret it. But in any event, the way to do this is to say, in some sense, okay, look, I've been at this for a while. I'm interested in hearing what your suggestions are. I want to know how you think that we who have been doing this for decades can do it better. And let people talk. And if they don't have an answer to that, then you know something about their credibility and where they're coming from. But I think that we all have to remember that none of us have all the answers, right? That we're always in the process of learning and growing. And you all know my friend Cindy Gallup has run this really incredible campaign in the advertising industry called Disrupt Aging, which is about the idea that older workers, older women in particular, have mountains of experience and do not age out of their creativity. And that has been something that has really been encouraging ad agencies, marketing agencies to hire older women, which I think is wonderful. But she also is very big on the idea of the fact that we can stay fresh and new, right? And, if you model this into activism, one of the things that I think about here is that, like the second wave of feminism failed in so many ways to account for all sorts of issues, right? Like sex positivity and, acceptance of intersectionality and, an understanding of the challenges that Black women face that are not the same challenges as what white women face. And, we have to look back also, you go all the way back to the suffrage movement where white women forced Black women suffragettes to walk at the back of the line and they sold out the rights of Black women to vote. Like, it's not like anyone who's been at this for very long, doesn't have certain blind spots. And so, I kind of always want to be challenged. And it's also really important that those who come up behind us also realize that they may have things to learn from us. But I think we model how to be generous in the approach, right? Those of you who don't know nonviolent communication strategies, I have plus and minuses about that, but you can go read Marshall Rosenberg's seminal book on this, and it talks about how to respond to people who are coming at you with like, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about, or you should just sit down and go away. You model it back by saying, what I'm hearing from you is that you think you've got some new ideas that aren't being taken into account. Would you be willing to talk about that with me? And that creates more of a dialogue. The more that we can help people understand that they are being heard, the better off we are. Now, there are some people, don't get me wrong, you all know I had to lock my Twitter account again this week, where there's no talking to anybody. And those people are, in some cases, bots right now on Twitter. But if they're real folks, part of what needs to be understood here is that, part of diversity and intersectionality on the left involves an understanding of the various viewpoints that people come to the table with. And if you are so hard in your views, and I see this a lot with like young, white, male, straight, cisgendered socialists, like for lack of a better way of putting it, there's no room there. And that in and of itself is another form of white supremacist patriarchy. Because if they're not listening to Black queer women, Black trans women, they're not listening to anybody else who's got a different viewpoint about what's necessary and needed right now. They're not listening to folks like Jim Clyburn. I don't know what to tell you. I don't know there's much of a dent that can be made there, just in the same way I worry about the dents that can be made with regard to Trump. So, again, the thing I really want to encourage now, and I guess this is a place to go, I always hate it in the last few minutes. I'll just tell you, I have this like real like personal glitch about the fact that when I start talking about like activism and strategy and self-care and all of that, the numbers always fall off on the broadcast. And every once in a while I look up and I'm like, we lost 40 people in the last 2 minutes. Because I often feel like I save the best for last, and maybe I'm wrong about that. But, I will just say this, okay? One of the biggest challenges right now for all of us is going to be the pivot, right? It's going to be the pivot from fighting back to building toward. And one of the things that we're going to need as we build toward that better future is collaboration, right? And the capacity to work with people who don't look, act, or love like us. And I'm not talking about on the Trump side of things. I'm not talking even about Republicans and centrists. I'm talking about people who are on the left, who have been committed to these issues, who really believe in building a better future. We're still diverse, not a monolith, right? And so, and we're not monoliths even in our various identity communities, right? So it's just really important right now that we find ourselves able to listen, and also to understand that we have to reject a certain kind of hard-headedness. That doesn't mean reject your principles. It doesn't mean reject your values. It does mean that if you are not willing to listen to other people who are on the same side as you, you're losing out. And we're all going to lose out as a result of that. So, so that's that. There are moments for really like hardcore fighting back, and you all know that I believe in that. I mean, how could I have learned from ACT UP and not know that, right? I did die-ins, right, on my college campus. And other things. I did sit-down strikes inside administrators' offices where we shut the building down so they would rewrite campus rape policies. I believe in that kind of activism very directly, and I believe around certain kinds of issues. And at certain moments, that sort of hard-headedness is required. Right now, we just have this incredible opportunity in this country with this win to create radical, generation-altering change. And we can do it together, right? In collaboration. We need everybody at the table. We need everybody's voice represented on the same side as us. So that to me is really key. And, as always, you always know that you will always hear me say this, like Black women should be leading it. all the way. And by the way, if you did not see the statement this morning from our new UN ambassador, you should go watch it. Speaking of that. All right, that's it for today. Much love to all of you. Yes, good trouble. Got a lot more good trouble to get into. We got a long way to go, but I hope you all spend some time this week being thankful. Please take some time out publicly to be thankful for frontline workers. Please, as I said this morning, tip your delivery drivers right now in excess if you're not already doing that on a regular basis. And thank a healthcare worker in your community. You know, do something kind for the local hospital. The one thing I've been hearing, by the way, is that they are really missing the food deliveries that they were getting early in the pandemic because they're not even getting like a 30-minute lunch break in many instances right now. So there's a lot of ways to contribute. And also, I'll just say one other thing. Food banks are in dire need of contributions right now. So please, if you got a few extra bucks or you've got a stack of canned goods from earlier in the pandemic that you never used, take them to your local food bank and drop them off. That dire need right now. I mean, the lines are incredible and disturbing, and there's no help coming from this administration or the Senate before January. So please do everything that you can there. All right, much love to all of you. My kids are off school for the rest of the week. I will not be here, even though I'm going to do my best to get all this phone banking in. Encourage you to take your time this week to volunteer for something in Georgia, text banking, phone banking, postcards. And I will see you all back here on Monday. All right, much love to all of you. Thank you all so much, as always. Meant every word I said at the start of this broadcast about how you all have gotten me through as much as I've gotten you through. You know, it really, it actually feels much more like you guys get me through every day. But I'm glad to be here and serve, and I will see you all next Monday. All right, much love, everyone. Take care. Bye.